here, or to play some good right-hand harmony under the melody. Just things like that. Consider what your role is at that moment. And you also have to, if you're the lead player, you've got to make sure that your lead voice, your lead accordion voice, is sitting on top of the rest of the ensemble, which means I have to be playing loud enough to be heard over my cohorts up here on the stage, but by the same token, they have to listen to me so that if they can't hear me, they're playing too loud. So it's just, like I say, it's a combination of common sense, but listening really solves a lot of problems. You have to hear your own sound, and you have to hear yourself in the context of the people around you. And the size of the ensemble really makes a difference. You know, a duo, a trio, a quartet. If you're playing with bass and drums, it's a whole different ballgame. Or if you're playing with singers, instrumentalists, amplified instruments, that adds a whole nother dimension of it too. So just, for example, a duo, you play quite a few more notes than if you were playing with a quartet or a quintet or a septet. You don't have to fill absolutely every space, so you have to be constantly aware. And if you're playing with singers and instrumentalists together, once again, the singer has to be the featured moment. That has to be the expression, and everybody else is subordinate to the singer. And you've got to keep your eyes on the singer too. You've got to keep your eyes open, got to keep your ears open. And also think about this. People forget things when they're on stage with other musicians, particularly if you're in a small group. If you're playing in an orchestra, and Joanne knows this, everybody has their part. Every once in a while somebody will get lost, and you have to, the rule in that situation is, when in doubt, lay out. So it's an important thing to learn. And so much stuff to think about. Amplified instruments add this whole other dimension. It just becomes harder to hear the overall sound of the group when people are playing amplified instruments. So in a sense, you have to listen twice as hard. And you know, acoustics can make a huge difference in what people hear, both the audience and the performers. So you also have to consider the character of the music. Is it soft music, loud music? Is it dance music, fast, slow, poignant, jubilant, humorous, etc.? All of these things come into play when you're thinking about that. Okay, maybe I can just, oh yes, I'm heading on to page 2 here. We talked about a lot of different styles, but here is my overall rule for being an accompanist for singers or instrumentalists. I think of it as being the velvet pillow upon which everything else rests. And you just want to make everybody as comfortable as possible. And that requires a lot of listening. And the accompaniment role as trying to make the other musicians as comfortable and happy as possible. Of course, you're looking at making the best possible sound. Overall advice, keep it simple. Keep it simple. When you're playing parts that aren't necessarily written down, and you need to really hear how much you want to contribute. You don't have to play all the time. I mean, say if you're in a quartet or even a trio, there is a lot of interaction that can happen, but you're not always going to be the lead necessarily. You know, that's most obvious in a duet. If you think of the duets that you hear between Stas and Joanne, for example, or Michael and his duet partner, they go back and forth quite a bit. They switch roles from being lead to accompany, and you can play a whole lot more under those circumstances. The more instruments that you add, the less notes you really need to contribute, and you'll become more aware of changing textures of the music. You know, you listen to Beethoven or any of your favorite classical composers, the texture's not always the same. It changes. throughout the piece of the music. There are tooty moments when everyone's playing and they're playing full blast and having a great time, and then suddenly it's soft, and then so that's the listening aspect, very important. So also, this is important too, music for dancing. Of course, what is the important thing there? Keeping the beat for the dancers. And we could do a whole workshop on just how to play rhythm accordion for dancing, for whatever the style of music happens to be. But for dancing, the rhythm's gotta be there. Okay, where am I? I'm still on page 2. It sounds like I've been talking for an hour. Maybe I should play something. Getting started, specifics. If you're reading your accompaniment part, a lot of your work is done for you. You just need to listen carefully to the balance between yourself and the lead voice. Make sure you are soft enough. Use a good register switch. Here is another aspect that I find very interesting. A lot of beginning accordionists in particular will use a lot of reeds, and my general approach is to use less reeds most of the time, and the more reeds you have, the more sound you get. And the beauty of the accordion is that all of those notes, here's just single reed, they all sound at the same intensity and the same. It's a very saturated sound. The accordion plays every single one of those notes with the same amount of intensity. So when you're playing a big chord like this, they all sound exactly the same. So this can have a little better impact. There's a little more subtlety at play there when you're working with just one reed as when you're working with numerous reeds in the right hand in particular. The same goes for left hand. Because it's saturated sound, it becomes then harder to get the nuance, I think. And so many beginning players are always working with their kind of master switch. I don't really have a master switch on this. There's my big sound. The same thing with a different switch can sound completely different. And so you really need to understand what the appropriate sound that you're looking for. If it's a big dance piece or a zydeco piece, then that big sound is really, really wonderful and totally appropriate. But there's a lot more nuance that can be had just from adding and subtracting reeds. There's double bassoon. And it's subtle. Some of the switches on your accordions probably sound very similar to one another. So being able to recognize the different nuance of the switches that you have available to you is, just one other aspect of the beauty of this instrument, is having all of these sounds available to us. But you have to know when it works, when it's going to be good. Is Moon River going to be sounding good like this? Or is it going to be sounding better like this? Same notes, completely different approach, completely different feeling. And, so dynamics, we have a huge, huge dynamic range available to us. And that's one of the first things. Accordions can whisper or they can shout. And everything, literally everything in between. It's just a beautiful thing. All right. Well, Betty Jo just covered so much in her workshop. I was just so impressed with that. And of course, on page 3, what do you learn? I would strongly urge you to learn all the chords and their inversions and your scales, etc., etc. This is, it's the basic stuff. And I'm going to suggest a way to get busy on some of your right-hand chords in particular. For example, that minor 7 flat 5, which Betty Jo referenced is, I'll start with B minor 7/5/5, really easy to remember. It's like a D minor chord with a B as the lowest note. So, of course, now I can't play. How does that work? And it's a shape, and you get used to that shape. And once you have that shape, you can play them all pretty easily going up and down the keyboard. But here's a way to practice getting used to these chords in your right hand and playing them in all their inversions. Root position as an arpeggio, okay? Then first inversion, like so. And so on, you just keep going up the keyboard. And then you can do that with, and I like to say to my students, multiple hits on the chords when you're practicing them. So you can move up and down the keyboard, you know, hit it 4 times, then change inversions, then change it again, change it again. Pretty soon you can talk and chew gum at the same time. You can put it where you want it when you need it. And giving yourself multiple, and say it goes for a left hand, and if you find yourself going from a B minor 7/5/5, the 5 chord associated with that is E7. So you can practice. And if they're having trouble at the first, really slow. Give yourself multiple chances to do that. That way that muscle memory just starts to kick in and you don't forget. And you also begin to associate the sound of that minor 7/5/5 and the resolution to the 5 chord. Yeah. So, yeah, that's just a little embellishment on what Betty Jo had to say about it. Okay, and right hand, the consideration there is too, because of this wonderful saturation of sound, and that each note sounding at the same volume level, you don't always need the full chord in your right hand all the time. Just don't need to do it. You don't have to do it. So as Betty Jo pointed out, you can do just 2 notes will work. Are you missing anything? Not really. I could add the 3rd note. But combinations of that. But just thinking about, do I really need to add all of the notes of the chord? Chances are you can leave out a note. 2-note chords, because of that perfect evenness of the sound, you know, the balance between the upper note and the lower note, they really sound full all by themselves, and the essential notes can really just stand out without any additional notes. All right, fills. Well, gosh darn it. Betty Jo covered that so great. I can't do a better job than that. I mean, it was really wonderful. Yeah, playing fills, somebody asked a question, how do you learn how to do that? Well, it's in between the leads phrases, playing melodic or chordal ideas in between the lead phrase. It's a skill that you develop over time. You know, you're not going to learn it immediately and be able to play as good as Betty Jo does it. It's just something you will pick up, and it can start simply, The simple fills can be just as effective as a fancy fill. It doesn't have to have a lot of notes. It can just be, okay, let's see if I can give another example. I heard somebody across the hall playing. So a simple can be just all you need. It doesn't always have to be a ton of stuff. Yeah, can you get fancy? Sure, you can get fancy, and just you can stay within your means. You can be a good filler at whatever level you are at right now. If you're a beginner, simple fills. If you get a little more intermediate, and you can still stay within your means, and just do what is technically possible for you. You don't always have to try for something that is necessarily over your head or over your technical ability. And you will definitely come off being more authentic as a player that way if you stay within your musical ability. And you're going to be a great player at whatever level you're at. That's my view, anyways. Okay, keep your eyes open. Yeah. When you're playing with other musicians, well, and if you're in an orchestra, you obviously have to keep your eyes on the conductor, no doubt about it. That just is a given. So you have to know your music well enough so that you can look up from time to time. If you're always glued to the notes, boy, this is a hard concept for students sometimes. They're always looking at the notes. And it doesn't necessarily help. And I think encouraging your students to begin to look away, particularly when you can tell as a teacher or as a fellow musician that they know that piece pretty well, Now you've got a 10-year-old or a 12-year-old or a 16-year-old, they know they've been working on that piece for a month, they know that piece. So encourage them to look away. I actually will do this with my students sometimes. Look up, look around. You don't need to see where your fingers are going, and you can't see your left hand anyway, so it doesn't matter. Look around, look up, look away from the music. Practice looking away from the music. That is just something that your students can develop. But they need to be encouraged. Otherwise, I see people just glued to the notes, and it's just, you talk to them and they say, oh, I lost my place, right? They'll do less losing of their place in the music if they're not always constantly looking at it. And I also learned something really important a long, long time ago. Do you remember Evelyn Wood reading dynamics? Do you remember that? It was a speed reading course. It was a speed reading course of reading English, reading literature. And my mom forced me to do it when I was in high school. Actually, she didn't really force me because I really enjoyed it. And I learned a lot too. And one of the main things that course was telling is that our eyes take in a whole lot of information, and we don't have to keep looking at the word. Once your eyes see that word, your brain has processed it, and you can just keep moving. And that's the whole theory behind that speed reading course, is just keep your eyes moving and keep going. And so I have this little icon that I use. I'll draw it on students' music sometimes. Just, two little eyes and an arrow. Keep your eyes moving ahead. And that will help you start to hear the music better, not constantly looking at the note that you're actually playing. Once you're looking at the note you're actually playing, you don't need to see it anymore. It's logic at that point. Then it will allow you to look around and see your other musicians. And see the conductor, which can be very, very helpful. And of course, if you're reading something really intense, you might need to keep your eyes on the music a little more frequently, but still try to develop the skill of looking away from the printed sheet. Music's not on the sheet. It's in here, it's in here, it's in your heart. So, playing with other harmony instruments, left hand groove and padding. This is on page 4. Yeah, if you're playing with other chording instruments, keep your left hand simpler, as a general rule. And that also is going to be a stylistic thing. I mean, if you're playing polka and you're with a good tuba player, for example, you might be doubling the tuba. You know, and that's fine as long as you're coordinated. I mean, if you're clashing, then there's something terribly wrong. But you can always, particularly when there's a bass player in the ensemble, you want to kind of stay out of that person's territory. And so bass playing under those circumstances has to be a lot simpler and a lot, try not to, I guess the walking bass would be a good idea. Don't do that if you've got a bass player, you know, because that's their territory. They're going to play that walking bass line. It's not the accordion player's job under those circumstances. So, yeah, coordinating with your other musicians. And likewise, if you're playing with another instrument, like a guitar or a pianist, who are playing chords, harmony a lot, likewise, you really need to either work those things out or just listen very carefully to what the other musician is doing. Yeah, you can coordinate with the piano player and play a bunch of chords too, as long as it's working together, and that's where the listening aspect really comes in. But by the same token, you're relieved of the responsibility of having to fill all the harmonic space all the time. You can kind of trade off with the piano player or the guitar player. And that's where simplicity comes in. For example, I'm good. Maybe here's something like a reggae tune. A guitar player is just doing that. 1, 2, 3, 4. You can double that, literally, with a guitar player, and it's a very strong and pungent rhythmic sound that really gives that kind of reggae Bob Marley. There it is, right off the bat. And I like this for other styles of music, you know, rock and roll you were talking about. You can play eighth notes like that and coordinate with the guitar player, but it's got to be together. It has to be together. Or you can play on beats 2 and 4 if that's a strong rhythmic emphasis. And for example, most rock music has a strong. So the guitar player is going. I can just play. While they're doing, so there's ways of working out those things. And how do you learn that stuff? Well, you know, copying people, listening to recordings is probably one of the best ways to learn. And listening to, of course, listening to live music, listening to the players that you admire, either on recordings or in live performance. See how they do it. How did they manage that? You know, were they playing a ton of stuff in their right hand? Were they playing, you know, just listen to how they manage it. And there's, because there aren't really any good manuals. I mean, you look at, you know, for example, jazz books. There's tons and tons of jazz instructional books. I find a lot of them just kind of inscrutable. I mean, except for the theory. The theory is great, but man, it doesn't tell you how to make that sound. It doesn't really tell you how to make the sound. You have to hear people do it. And the great jazz trumpet player, Clark Terry, used to say, imitate, assimilate, innovate. And what he meant by that is you listen to the players that you admire, you imitate what they do, you try to incorporate, in other words, assimilate their style, assimilate the sound that they make, and then you become an innovator and you do it in your own way. So just, there you go. Boy, I'm talking way too much. Anybody have any questions? Dance music, padding. Padding, yes, padding. I don't think accordion players hear that term very much. Padding is when you're really just playing as if you were the violin section. So if it's, there's the orchestra, they're playing that, but there's always a part in that that's going to be going. That's a pad, and it works, it's just extended long notes on the chords. And once again, you don't need to play giant chords. You can play just a few notes and still create that nice harmony. Ba-da-da-da, ba-da-da-da, da-da-da, 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 and then the violins. Everybody has their part, but padding can be a very beautiful thing on the accordion. And sometimes as simple as one note can really be fun. Can be very beautiful in certain situations. And it's something that we don't think about as playing those long extended, because we have that ability, so why not? Why not play just, but I think under those circumstances, the fewer notes that you play, I think, are more to the point, because usually it's in situations where there are other chording instruments and somebody's playing the lead, then you want to just embellish with very few notes, and they can be long extended notes that outline the harmony as you go through the song. All right, where did I get to? Page 5 yet? I guess so. Yeah. Some final thoughts. I spent a lot of time practicing accompaniment. Just thinking, imagining how the other instruments are going to be around me. And I learned a lot just from that. And you can practice accompanying, just playing the chords of the song. Well, that would be a good, let's see. What's another good start? Okay, satin, I'll go back there for a second. So that's just a typical kind of accompaniment that I would do. And you can learn it in a couple of different keys, and that will illuminate some things for you too. Take one of your simple songs and imagine that you're not playing the melody. Imagine that, charade would be a good example. Just imagine thinking about just padding like that. Just imagining that the melody is there, imagining that there are other musicians around you can be and it can be fun to do too. And then you can hear how few notes I need to play so that you get the idea that it's charade. I mean, it's still, the chord changes to charade. So listen. This applies to anything you will be doing in music. Listen while you're playing, listen to yourself, listen to the other musicians, listen to the lead, listen to the overall sound in the room. I really enjoyed that. in particular. Because you're in different situations. You're in your practice room at home. Well, listen to how it sounds in there. Well, you're in the ballroom here at the hotel. You listen to where the sound is bouncing and what you're hearing. Just see if you can differentiate what each musician is playing. Not always possible. That's a big deal. I remember the first time a teacher suggested to me that I try to figure out all the parts in an orchestra, in a piece that I was really familiar with. Can you hear the clarinet? Can you hear what the cello is playing at that moment? Man, that was just like mind-boggling. Yeah, I can hear some of it, but I can't hear all of it. But I mean, we want to strive to hear what everybody's doing. All right. So, and I've talked about this stuff before, and every time I talk about it, I think about a million other things. So I added this little addendum. And these are just, am I going too long here? Are we still okay time-wise? So I thought about what makes me happiest when I'm playing with other people as either a leader or a side person. And this goes for not just professional musicians, but it goes for just people who are enjoying playing music with other people. All the same things can still apply. Music, of course, be prepared, practice your parts, bring all your sheet music to the rehearsal or whatever you guys are doing, or your tablet. Yeah, you'd be surprised how many people forget their music. And if you're showing up, if you're playing with a group of people, make sure you've got all your gear, like your amp, your mic, your stand light. Make a checklist. It's common sense type of stuff. Make sure you have what you need. Organize your gear so that it's easy to set up. Yeah, sometimes see people come, they've got 6 different bags, and you wonder, well, where did I put that? Where's that? Where's my stand light? Well, I think it's back here. And also musically, if you are uncertain about something, don't be afraid to ask questions. Even if you're just playing for hobby, for fun, ask questions if you're unsure about a tune or what you're rehearsing, the form of the tune, who counts it off, who takes the lead, who's playing backup, all of those things. And C, I think maybe Joanne will appreciate this. No noodling. Don't noodle. Do your warm-ups at home or before everybody else is, or while everybody else is setting up. Then you can noodle away to your heart's content. But as soon as people are ready, just play the music that you're going to be playing. Just no fooling around. It's so annoying. So annoying. All right. Well, and then the social aspect. We all want to be treated with respect. And so you want to greet the people that you are performing with and support them when they sound good. I mean, we all want that. And it just makes sense. It makes everybody feel better. And when we feel better, we play better. I think that's just a common occurrence. And this is a really important one. Forgive your fellow musicians' errors. Yes. It's so important. And man, it just makes you feel terrible. You made a mistake, right? And the guy over there looks at, gives you the big dirty look. So you don't want that. It's not something you want to see, because they're going to make a mistake too, and you're not going to get your revenge then. And here's the thing about errors, and I talk about this for my students, that errors don't mean anything. They are literally, they don't have any meaning at all unless you give them meaning. If you call attention to your mistake, or if you let your mistake influence you, or react to it in any way, it's a waste of time to do that, first of all, because what's important is the expression of the music you're playing. That's really the most important thing. And errors have no meaning in that situation. They're gone in an instant, and if you let it bother you, you're wasting your time. It's just not worth spending time on, your eras. I had a young woman who was a piano student at the time, a long time ago, and she did this incredible flinch. She was a great little piano player, and she was playing Chopin and all this stuff. And she would be playing along. It didn't matter what the tune was. She'd be, what could I do? And then she'd, big flinch, if she hit the wrong key. And on a number of days, I saw her literally jump off the bench like that. It took a couple of months to break her of that, and she got it. She got it eventually, and then went on to be a really quite spectacular young player. I understand she went on to be an organist, a church organist, and yeah, errors. Forgive people. It's going to happen. And it's going to happen to you, so you can count on it. And the less you call attention to your mistakes or the mistakes of others, the happier everybody's going to be. And everybody wants your good attention and their moment to shine. And just playing in an ensemble, you want everybody to sound good around you. You want to sound good. You want the other people to do. Just common sense, but not necessarily something that everybody realizes automatically. So the business aspect, even if you're just playing for enjoyment, return the calls, return the emails promptly. You don't want to be waiting around. If you're getting together on Saturday, you want to make sure that everybody's got the message and that you're going to get together on Saturday. Excuse me. Knowing the hours of the gig, pay if you're getting paid, so nobody is upset about it. The dress code, the load in, show up on time, in time to set up if you have a number of things to set up. Yeah, and it's always good to get clear with the band leader. I just had this discussion the other day with a musician, and he would say the gig's over at 9. And then the gig would go overtime. And, you're sitting there and looking at your watch, and it's, I still try to do my best under those circumstances, but I finally had to say to him after a couple of times, I said, look, tell me the gig's over at midnight. And then if it's over at 9:30, I'll be happy. Know your limitations. If you can't handle the music, ask for an easier part or bow out of the situation. Say, I can't play this song. So if you need somebody to play it, it can't be me. And know what's expected of you. Is your role supportive? Are you leading sometimes, or specific tunes? Honor your agreements. Keep your calendar up to date. Excuse me. Avoid double booking. And this goes for you hobby players as well as professionals or semi-pros. Having those conflicts it's really upsetting to everybody involved, so just avoid that, I guess. All right, well, I've finished my outline here. Anything else that I can talk to you about? Any questions? Liz has a question. Sure, I have got a bunch of them actually. I can tell you some terrible horror stories about weddings. Oh my gosh. Oh, please. Mothers of the bride. So, I'll tell you one really funny one. Church in big downtown Seattle, a big church downtown Seattle. The mother of the bride was unhappy with the interior decor, and she had them repaint the choir loft before the wedding. How about that? Well, anyways, here's a story about playing. I worked with Chuck Berry a couple of times, and the funniest one was we were playing at, it was a corporate party in downtown Seattle. It was big, I can't remember whether it was Amazon or Microsoft. It was just, I was not the band leader, so I didn't do the arrangements. But it was a giant, imagine a ballroom about 3 times this size. You know, there were probably 750 people there, maybe. And they had a band, and I was playing as part of this band, and Chuck Berry was going to be the headliner, but they hadn't told the audience that. And the band played a short set, and then a comedian came on, and the comedian was really funny, and he said, "And now, folks, here is Chuck Berry." And ho-hum, nobody believed him. They just thought it was a joke, right? And so in the ballroom door comes Chuck Berry. And people were looking at me, is this a Chuck Berry impersonator? No, it was actually Chuck Berry. And he walked up on stage, and he was trying to plug in his guitar in, and it was taking him a while. And he took the guitar off, and he handed it to me. And he said, "Can you plug this thing in?" And so I looked at it, and he played a semi-hollow body guitar. The plug, the jack for the plug had fallen inside the guitar. There was no way, absolutely no way that it was going to get plugged in. So fortunately, the bass player in the band had brought a guitar. Chuck only traveled with one guitar. Do you need more than one? I guess not. Unless you're Paul McCartney, and then you have like 6 basses ready to go, and your guitar player has a guitar tech, and he comes out and hands you a guitar anytime it goes out of tune. You don't have to tune it up, you just wait for the next guitar to show up. So Chuck had only one, and he ended up playing the show, and of course the moment he started playing, it was like, yeah, that's Chuck Berry. And he was great. I mean, he was really great that night. Excuse me. I played with him one time before when he was awful, and so I didn't have high expectations of it. But this man, he was just so on it, and it was so much fun. It was like being in a small nightclub. Yeah, we had a good time. Okay, there's a story. Anything else?
Play something.
Play something.
Yeah.
What am I going to play?
I never tire of your playing.
Oh, man. Let's see, what do I want to play? So now I've forgotten how to play. know, 'cause- Thank you. Thanks very much. Well, it's been such a pleasure speaking with you today. Thank you for coming, and just great to see you all. So many nice friends here, and new people, new faces too. That's great. And I gotta say, nobody ever says it, but playing solo accordion is darn hard. So you can tell your students that too. And so I highly recommend playing with other musicians as often as possible. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Murl.